Okay, kids, I have your, assuming you've been following the stories so far, we're ready to continue at chapter 4 of the Pentagon. Let me check the time first. On arrival at the Pentagon, Jimmy accompanied the officer to a large conference room filled with all kinds of military brass as well as some people in civilian clothes. On the front row were high-ranking Army, Navy, and Air Force officers that Jimmy took to be the Joint Chiefs of Staff. The officer whispered in Jimmy's ear, "The Joint Chiefs are the highest-ranking members of each major branch of the armed services, and they act in an advisory military capacity for the President and the Secretary of Defense, with the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs serving as his chief military advisor. Their findings here today will be reported to the National Security Council, so put on a good show for them." Jimmy kind of liked this officer, who said his name was Major Flynn. He had a twinkle in his eyes and seemed to have a good sense of humor. He then told Jimmy that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff was a general at the Marine Corps, and that the other members were comprised of two admirals of the Navy, one of which was the vice chairman, a general of the Air Force, a general of the Army, and another general of the Marines. The attendees were chatting amongst themselves before the meeting was called to order by the chairman, and some strange looks were cast Jimmy's way. No one had ever seen a child in such a meeting. Jimmy was then introduced by the chairman as a young man who was going to give a demonstration that would defy the laws of gravity. Very few members of the large gathering had any inkling at all as to what to expect, but one member looked at his watch to make sure it wasn't April the 1st. He hardly thought that a practical joke would be played on such an occasion, but could think of no other reason for such a preposterous statement. The chairman motioned for Jimmy to begin. That's when Jimmy had a wonderful idea. He would stand on a chair, wave his arms, and pretend to try to fly, and then pretend that he couldn't. And then all these very important men would feel really silly. But before he could carry out his plan into action, the door opened, and who should walk in but the President himself. He announced to the chairman that he had canceled some appointments and could attend after all. Of course, Jimmy couldn't let the President down, so after the chairman motioned Jimmy to continue, he simply flew up in the air and circled around the room several times before landing on top of a tall cabinet. Sheer pandemonium broke out, with everyone talking at once. The chairman motioned Jimmy to join him in front of the audience. He put his arms around Jimmy's shoulder as the noise abated to complete silence. "Gentlemen," he said, "we have here a technology that will revolutionize not only warfare, but our entire lives as human beings upon this planet. Each of you has the highest security clearance, and I know that none of you will divulge the slightest hint as to what you witnessed here today. Many of you have undoubtedly seen the news clip of young Jimmy's flight at the Santa Monica Pier. The media will simply be told that it was a demonstration of an experimental projection system being conducted by government scientists, and that Jimmy here was just an actor in a three-dimensional film being projected into the air. The incident will quickly be forgotten, and we can quietly work on adapting this technology for our own purposes. Your imagination is the limit of what can be accomplished with such a free energy system. Now, Jimmy, I'd like you to tell these gentlemen exactly how you acquired this power and what your understanding is of how it works." Jimmy thought for a moment before speaking. He knew he really had no option now but to tell them the whole story. When he had finished, there was deadly silence, not only because it was such an incredible story, but no one could see any possible way that a pair of tennis shoes could power the energy needs of the world. Oh, certainly, if they could be reproduced and en masse, soldiers could wear them for sneaking behind enemy lines and so on, but even that was a big if. I know what you're all thinking, said the chairman, but our scientists will dissect these shoes, take each fiber, and analyze them, and I am confident we can transfer the power to various instruments and amplify it. We'll be able to make all kinds of motors and engines run without outside sources of energy. We'll be able to run our transportation, automobiles, trains, buses, planes, and so on, as well as for military uses. Maybe we can condense the power to make immensely powerful bombs without releasing radiation. That was enough for Jimmy. Sir, he said, with all due respect, what you are saying sounds like a big leap of faith to me. I'd just like to take my shoes and go home. Now, Jimmy, said the chairman, patting him on the head, you know we can't let that happen. Why, when this technology is developed, you and all your friends will have magic shoes and you can fly around all you want. Look, before we adjourn, let's all go outside into the private yard here. We have a Jeep and a tank out there, and we want you, Jimmy, to get inside the Jeep, put it in neutral, and see if you can make it go back and forth using just the magic of your shoes, the power of the shoes. After everyone was outside, Jimmy did as he was told, and sure enough, he had no trouble maneuvering the Jeep back and forth. And then he concentrated on an upward thrust and sailed the Jeep right up in the air above the roof of the building and came slowly back down. The entire gathering was speechless, including the president. Quick, cried the chairman, jump in the tank. Just sit there at the controls and don't touch anything. Just concentrate on moving it upwards. Jimmy did as he was told and flew the tank up in the air. He hesitated for about 1 second, then flew it directly home at lightning speed. He landed outside his house in Santa Monica, California, in about 5 seconds flat. That's from the East Coast to the West Coast. Meanwhile, back at the Pentagon, sirens were going off, bells ringing, and frantic Army brass calling their aides on their cell phones. Scramble the jets! Call out the National Guard! Find that kid at all costs! That's the end of the chapter. See. Oh, we've still got some time. So. Okay. Incidentally, the book, it's not in bookstores in case you wanted to buy it, because it's a print-on-demand book. They just make copies as they're ordered. You can get it on Amazon or download it off their off their site. So actually, I think you have to have their machine, the Kindle machine. But it's a very nominal cost, about $4. Okay, to do that. Okay. Well, we can read some of chapter 5, I think. Started at 3:41. Oh, we only have a couple of minutes. Well, let's leave this, just leave the first paragraph. Chapter 5, A Brief Visit Home. As soon as Jimmy landed the tank in the street in front of his house, he jumped out and headed for the front door, but it was locked. He rang the bell, but no answer. That's when he noticed all the shades were drawn. Fortunately, the spare key was where it was supposed to be, and Jimmy quickly let himself in. He then remembered that the president had said his parents would be in Washington the next day, so he assumed that since they were not home, they were already on their way. Okay, kids, I guess that's all for now. If you're still with me, then you must be enjoying the story. If so, thank you. I'm just an amateur writer, I'm not a professional, and I couldn't interest any traditional publishers in my work. I've got 3 or 4 other books, which, if there's any indication, no one's made any comments so far, but if there's any indication that they like this, then I'll read my other stories too. In fact, they're available free for download off the internet, and on Kindle if you have the machine, although there's a small charge on that. Okay, thank you. Bye.